Hello and welcome to WTO Forum. For 60 years, international trade has been one of the most important economic factors linking countries and helping to raise living standards around the world. Now, after the financial crisis and the serious spike in prices for food and energy, the public skepticism is on the rise, fueling protectionist sentiment in many capitals. The question today is, what can stakeholders in the international trading system do to reverse this trend and bolster public support for trade? We're very fortunate to have with us today two experts, Alexandre Parola, a minister with Brazil's permanent mission in Geneva to the United Nations, and Anthony Gooch, Director of Public Affairs and Communications at the OECD. Gentlemen, welcome. Alexandre, your views on this. What can be done to shore up public support for trade?
Well, first of all, thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the privilege of being here. I guess this question admits two answers. The brief one is to reaffirm the commitment to the system, where the authorities, presidents, heads of state, and trade ministers of trade, negotiators, they have to make all the efforts towards showing that this is an important issue, the system works and it should be working. In a way, the average people, the people on the street, the worker back home, he should feel that his life is benefiting for this. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to maintain support for the system. But this is only the brief answer. A more complex answer admits of two dimensions. The first one is to bear in mind that we are actually witnessing a new moment in the international scenario. It's a moment of multipolarism in the economic arena. We have new actors. It's enough to compare the reality of the negotiations now and what they were 2 decades ago in the Uruguay round. The Doha round is not a game of few players, it's a game of many players which are important and which have to be heard on the table. So this is an important issue in itself. The other one is, let us not forget about the lessons, the famous lessons of the past. We have a crisis now in the financial area. It has become common currency to talk about the 30s. It may be overblown or not, I don't know, but it is certainly the case that we should not repeat the mistakes of the 30s. If we bear in mind what happened in the 30s was there was a huge debate about the bilateral solutions and multilateral solutions, and we know how much that cost to solve this political debate. So what I think is important now is to reaffirm the commitment to the system and to translate this commitment to the system into concrete gains to people. And from this perspective, a good display of confidence in the system would be successful to conclude the Doha round. So my initial thoughts on this would be these.
Anthony.
I would argue that human beings have extraordinarily short-term memories. We've talked about the 1930s, and there aren't too many people around who actually remember the 1930s. There are many people who studied it. So we need to be very mindful of past mistakes, and we need to remember them at this time, and we need to have people in positions of responsibility to have that uppermost in their minds as we look to address the confluence of crises that the world is currently facing. And in that respect, to argue that free trade is a good thing for itself is something that will not stand up to scrutiny. We need to rehearse the arguments and explain that case clearly and convincingly. And also recognize that trade is one of the elements that we're looking at the moment in terms of economic well-being and prosperity. We're looking at a financial system in severe crisis. We're looking, as you said at the beginning, at a crisis, a lack of fuel, a lack of food, energy deficiencies, but a climatic change challenge at the same time. Just at the moment where we are entering into some of the rockiest times that we have had economically for some time. And this is not the best moment, in a way, to be addressing some of the very important systemic challenges that we have before us. But organizations such as the World Trade Organization, the international global governance organizations, they are the key to a future success, because the fundament of the success is going to be the fact that we are interdependent, If we're going to get out of crises, we're going to do that together. We're not going to do that at the expense of others. And that's where the argument against protectionism is at its strongest. Because when you come together as teams, when you come together as countries together in this World Trade Organization, 150 countries, you have the ability to get together to be able to find a way forward. If we find ourselves splitting into rival blocks, then we've seen what that has delivered in the past.
So we sink or swim together then, Alexander?
As it has always been the case. And I think it was a very appropriate reference to the multilateral dimension. I think the real debate today is not only protectionism versus liberalization, it's the importance of preserving the multilateral dimension of the system. We have to bear in mind that bilateral solutions have their merits, but they won't bring the results that only a true multilateral solution can produce. So that's something I think it's important to bear in mind at this point.
I would also say that there's a lot of responsibility on the World Trade Organization right now. Not only from the point of view of international trade, which in and of itself is one of the most important vectors of globalization, but also because it is the multilateral institution par excellence. It's delivered significant benefits as the GATT and now the World Trade Organization for 60 years, as you said at the beginning. And the multilateral system in a way stands or falls in part by what happens in the World Trade Organization. If we can deliver concrete fruits and continue to deliver those concrete fruits in the World Trade Organization, then we've got a chance, for example, of finding a solution on climate change in the UN-sponsored talks, or indeed in looking at some of those systemic shortages that we've identified, the energy crises that we have. So it's a real test case of the ability of the world to actually govern itself at a global level, rather than falling into the trap of going our own ways regionally or individually as countries where, as I've said earlier, down the years, that hasn't shown to be the most effective way to solve those sorts of systemic problems.
Do you agree that a solution, a just outcome to the Doha round might inspire this sort of confidence, not only in the public but among governments, and enable them to work together more effectively in other fora?
Well, I'm convinced of that, but maybe the positive result is not the most important thing to keep in mind here, but a negative result would be devastating. I think I fully believe that a positive result is needed, and it will strengthen and reinforce the confidence in the system. But a negative result would send a very, very negative message in the moment in which we need those institutions. We have, as you mentioned, the financial crisis already. If we're going to start a commercial international crisis now in a protectionist war, this it doesn't tell well for the future.
Have those chances been elevated as a result of these various crises we confront today?
I think it's a far tougher scenario than we were in before, honestly speaking, and it's a far bigger challenge for the people at the highest levels. But that's when you really got to show your mettle as statesmen and world leaders. That's when you can really show your true colours, and I think it's going to ask, and it will ask, some very serious questions of us as international organisations and of global leadership at a top level. And we also have the pending challenge of the fact that we have some very significant shifts taking place at a global level in terms of responsibility, in terms of power, in terms of finance. And perhaps they need to be reflected a little bit better in the international system than they are at present.
Alexander, your final thoughts?
I fully agree to that. I think there's a real need that the international system adjusts to better reflect the new realities of power. I mean, we have inherited a system that was built in the 40s, in the 50s, and now it's time to reform. Not only to strengthen the system, but to reform it.
Anthony Gooch, you have the last word.
Well, really, it's a call to arms to say that right now is when we need effective global governance more than ever. It's not the easiest time to make the case for global governance, because normally when in times of trouble, people do tend to close in on themselves a little bit. And so there is a real responsibility, duty and obligation by all of us to be as honest as possible in these times, to be to resist the temptation of political expediency as much as possible. And I think with that and with that sort of spirit, and successful results in a forum like the World Trade Organization to show the way, then we stand a good chance of being able to see our way out of what's looking like a bit of a dark tunnel.
Anthony Gooch, Alexandre Parola, gentlemen, thanks very much to you. And thanks to you for watching WTO Forum.